and I posted on Facebook, hey, I wrote my first book between Christmas and New Year's. And one of my previous guests saw that post and said, hey, I know a publisher. Let me introduce you. And made a connection. January 5th, I met the publisher. I actually met two other publishers who, oh, we can do edits and we can do this and we can do that in 6 months and 8 months. And, next year your book will be in print. And this other publisher that I met said, man, we could do it by your birthday. It's a little on the simple side. My intention was, when I started, was I want to teach my children the entrepreneurial things that they didn't teach in school. And that was kind of the premise that I started with. And that was the audience that I was kind of starting with. And of course, it kind of shifted towards a combination between what I wanted to teach my kids and what I was working with my existing clients. And so that's kind of where the book kind of ended up and why we titled it, The Entrepreneur Mindset Shift, Growth Characteristics of Success. Also, those were searchable keywords. So that was a combination of how the title came about.
Okay. So I have this guy pops up on my screen here on Living the Next Chapter from Colorado. We just had a little chat before we hit record. We've talked about moose. We've talked about beautiful scenery. Again, he's in Colorado. So that's a big thing. My guest, Robert Peterson's with me today. We're going to be talking about our mindset. We're going to be talking about adding value to our life. I have somebody here who smiles for a living. And it's very good to have him here. Robert, welcome to the podcast. You're smiling. How are you? You good?
I am well, Dave. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, we started our conversation about your fireplace because it's so rare to see a real fireplace nowadays. And I understand that your left side is much warmer than your right.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah. At some point, I might have to flip over and get the other side. But yeah, so it's roaring away here. That is not a prop. That is actually a real fireplace. The beauty of this is I don't have to bring in any wood. There's a little light switch. I turn it on, I turn up the thermostat, and instant gas fireplace. It is
nice.
Awesome. The downside is my wife can't enjoy it because I've got this podcast thing set up. So she just kind of looks at me and crosses her arms like, when can I have the fireplace? So
tell her to host her own podcast.
Yeah, I'm not right. You've got time for that. I have 7 now. So that's why I'm here all the time. I need the heat. You're a podcaster as well. Let's start off with that because we can nerd out on podcasting for a second. Tell me about your podcast journey. When did you wake up one morning and go, hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to start a podcast. Tell me about that.
So prior to COVID, in January of 2020, I was invited to an entrepreneur event. My wife and I, it was pretty exclusive. There were 200 of us in the room. I guess 200 feels exclusive. I don't know. In Orlando, and basically they just went through all these business up and coming kinds of things. Podcasting was a piece, webinars, some digital marketing things, and I journaled. I said right in my notebook I was using at the time. I said we're gonna start a podcast, and of course I went home and I ordered all the cool stuff, right? The Podcaster Pro and the Podcaster Recorder and all the audio stuff, and actually even have lighting. And so, of course, that was January 2020. March 2020 gave me a big excuse for, that'll never work. Of course, it was probably the best time I could have, but I didn't until July of 21. And then in July of 21, I just reached out to some of the business people I had met, like at that event and a few other places, and said, hey, I want to start a podcast. I want to interview entrepreneurs and talk about their entrepreneurial journey. And it just took off. In fact, in July, I was planning to do 1 episode a week, and each episode I just end and talk to the guest and say, hey, who do you know that would make a great guest? And I started getting introduced to all these incredible people, because every guest doesn't introduce you to just one. They introduce you to 2 or 3. Yeah. And so then you got 2 or 3 people wanting to be on the podcast for every person you talk to. And next thing you know, I had 20 episodes in the can. I'm like, I can't have these sitting in the can and waiting. That's just ridiculous. So we quickly went from 1 episode a week to 2 episodes a week to last year, mostly 4 episodes a week. And it just took on a life of its own. So now I think we've recorded 270. We released episode 250 last week. And so, yeah, it's just been incredible. met incredible people. In fact, Tom Ziegler just scheduled to be a guest who's Zig Ziglar's son and running Zig's Enterprise. And so, that's the power of connections.
Just another
and that's
day
really
at the
what
office.
Our podcast has done.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to talk to him about Moose at all, though. I think. Really.
I might. It might just need to be a part of the conversation.
Did you know that moose are called swamp donkeys in Canada? You could bring that up. That's a great party opener.
Trivia.
Right? Yeah. Wow. So, okay, what have you learned about yourself as a podcaster? Like pre-podcasting, you were this Robert. Now, as a podcaster, you are now this Robert. What kind of skills have you picked up in the way along the journey?
I mean, I think I've always been curious, and I think it's allowed me to refine question asking, the ability to continue a conversation for an hour by asking appropriate questions, and of course questions that are not just interesting for me, the selfish side, because that's kind of where this started, right? Some of these conversations, it's been a selfish opportunity to have an hour conversation with this person. And then, but also entertaining for others that are listening. And so I want to ask questions in a way that aren't just selfish, but actually can add value and share somebody's journey, and try to ask things that not everybody's asking, right? I don't want my podcast to be the same as the other 100 podcasts that person's been on.
Yeah, exactly. And to be able to spend time with these people, and I try to do the math sometimes. Like I've spoken to lawyers that have written books. I've spoken to, like thought leaders and professionals. And if I did their standard rate to sit down with them to have a 1 hour conversation and consult with them, there's no way I can afford this. Right.
Exactly.
But then I send out a message and say, would you like to come talk on a podcast? Oh yeah. And it's like, whew, I just saved myself a lot of money, which is great.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly why I started it, is because my clients won't have access to these people. I don't even have access to these people, but they're willing to come on a podcast. And then the coolest thing is they introduce me to somebody else that's willing to come on a podcast. And so, I interviewed Bob Burg, and that was really cool because Bob, wrote The Go-Giver. I interviewed his co-author and his wife about their next book, The Go-Giver Marriage. But one of the people that Bob introduced me to, and he actually introduced me to 5, and all 5 of them have been incredible. But one of them is actually a really good friend, and is now friends with my wife and I, and we communicate on a regular basis. And she's coming to Colorado next month, and
Nice.
It's just incredible how far a connection can really go. And you think that the person you're talking to is the bigger connection, but the truth is they introduce you to somebody else that isn't necessarily famous, but they become a really good friend.
Yeah. Then that's a whole different element, right? And I love that about podcasting. What excites you about podcasting? Like, what are you looking forward to? Kind of a little bit of your plans for the podcast.
It still continues to be connection and meeting people. And more and more, over the last, 6 months, I've really, really decided that community is more important than just me putting this out there like a radio show. Yeah. And I think back to the radio shows when I was a kid that you could listen to talk radio and you could dial up on the phone and actually talk to the host through the phone. And I think I want to take my podcast to a live level where I'm having guests and we're having at least a chat opportunity where people that are listening can be chatting live. And whether that's a side thing that we do, a YouTube live or some other live in a group setting, like a webinar setting where people can chat. I just think community is the next step of creating greatness in my podcast space, is really finding a way to serve the community, but also get a chance to listen to them and get a chance for them to interact with me and my guests.
Yeah. One thing I added to I have websites for all my podcasts, but one of my podcasts is called the How to Podcast series, and which is kind of meta, but in there on my website, I have a little speak pipe thing where it's a little thing you can add to your website and people can leave a voice message, which then I get an email and I can take your voice message and put you into an episode. So I had Paulo in Brazil reach out to me and said, Dave, because your podcast, I'm going to create a podcast to teach students English here in Brazil. Thank you. And I'm like, wow. And then Rachel this week reached out to me from Australia. And again, she says, I was afraid of starting a podcast, but because of your podcast, Dave, now I'm going to go start one. And so what I did is I create a little mini bonus episode that is outside of my regular release. And I just do a short little thank you to that person who sent me a message. And I make an episode about them. And I include their trailer. I include their voice message. And I ask all my listeners and my past co-hosts on that show to go to their podcast and give them some love. So they get a benefit of a free commercial on my podcast to whoever's listening. But to build that community and hear back from your audience directly, that SpeakPipe thing is so great. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And you just add it to your website. People just click it and record a message and off they go. So tell me about when somebody has reached out to you and because of your podcast, they've sent you a message or they've, reached out to you in some way. How did that make you feel? And kind of like, what was that whole thing feel like for you?
Well, I mean, first, it's just incredible when guests who have been on hundreds of podcasts, maybe some of them thousands of podcasts, and they say, this was a really great interview. I really enjoyed our time together, right? That's the first level of like confirmation that I'm doing something right. And then when people listen and they leave a comment or they leave a review and they're saying, wow, this really helped me, or man, I really appreciated this conversation and looking forward to listening to others, right? Those are the times when you're just going, okay, wow, that's the reason, right? That's the real reason. Because the selfish reason was still for me to continue to make connections and invite these people in and ask questions that my clients would want to ask questions that my friends would want to ask. Yeah. But now it's like there's a community of people that are listening to these, and it's like they're getting value, which was always the intention or always the hope. But the fact that it really happens, you're like, oh, all right, we're doing something good in the world.
Yeah, because we podcast in a void. Like some of my podcasts I don't have any interviews for some of them, and so it's just me talking into a microphone. And you're like, is there anybody out there? Like, is it all connected? Is this working? I have no idea. Right. And you send it out there, and you see a couple numbers come up on your stats. You're like, oh, okay. And then, but somebody reaches out and sends you a message, or gives you a comment on social media, something. You're just like, oh wow, there are real people out there. This is really, really fun. So. If you haven't started a podcast yet, just like Robert and I, go out there and start one and build your network, build your community. That is outstanding. So keep going. Don't stop. That's only 250 episodes. That's nothing. You're just starting. Right. Yeah, 500 is big. Come on, let's go. Right? That's great. No, I encourage you to keep going. That's great to hear that story. I love it.
Well, and I think we're going to be adding some live opportunities and the recorded podcast has its own little homework and other things, but going live is coming around even more and more. It's simple to do on LinkedIn. It's simple to do on YouTube. Even Facebook is kind of where we started, even although it's not my favorite platform, but the interaction opportunities I think in live is definitely, and it saves you post-production stuff. So if you figure out live and how to put couple pieces together, you can go live and save yourself some production stuff and still be putting some really cool stuff out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't gone down that path yet. I'm really curious, but it feels like podcasting without a net where, like we can always edit something out and no one will ever know we flubbed our lines or made a mistake. That is like, that's live. That's people listening to you and going, wow, that guy says a lot, He's an machine,
My wife says my words obviously.
Obviously?
Apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Mine is so. I say so a lot. So you'll probably hear, I just did one. You'll hear that a lot as we talk. So now I'm aware, hyper aware. Having a podcast for me, what it taught me was how to listen, like just how to shut up when somebody's talking and not talk over them. Why? Because editing sucks when you're talking over your guest. Because now I have two voices competing for the space and you're trying to say something amazing. I'm trying to add my 2 cents and we're talking over each other. And So I just shut up. It's so great. My wife loves that part of my podcasting where I could just be like, shh, stop talking. Let me speak. Right. So I learned so much by sitting here and being quiet and allowing space for my guests to fully complete their thought before jumping into the next thing. And I don't run from a script. I don't have like the next question. So you tell a great story about how your dog finally came back and the emotions you felt when your dog came up the driveway, and the music started like in the movies, and you ran out and embraced your dog and been gone for 5 years. It was the greatest moment of my life. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So what's your favorite food? And you're like, I just gave you gold and you want to go to the next question, So anyway, I like to listen to my guests, and your answer sparks my next question. And for me, that as an audience member, I feel like we're all together on the edge of our seat going, I want to know more about the dog in the driveway. Come on, more. So that's kind of how I approach it. So yeah, I love it. It's great.
Me too. I think one of the challenges, and for the most part, most of my guests, they'll go just a little bit, and then, and it's time to reel them in, right? Every now and again, you got one that 20 minutes in, and like, wait, is this his podcast or mine?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's kind of like
occasionally
fishing.
Occasionally you just gotta, whoa, hey, this is still my show. Let me interject here something.
It's like you're out in a boat, you got a really good fish on the line, but you just got to tire them out a little. Just let them swim, right? Let them swim. Eventually they'll tire out and you can reel them into the boat. So that's kind of how I look at it. Just let them go. Let them go. Yeah. Okay, so let's switch gears from podcasting, because I could talk about that all day, to a wonderful podcaster. How does podcasting and a book, tell me about the bridge between podcasting and being an author. How does that kind of work? So, and does it help?
Absolutely. I think the book, the podcast adds some credibility, right? You've got something out there. There's content in the world permanently that people can find and people can connect to. And then the book comes alongside of it, and both of those things say, oh, hey, this guy is okay. And then you get some reviews from both, right? You get reviews of the podcast, because really I think that's the cool thing about podcasting and authorship is you get reviews and ratings, and people can actually decide whether you're a 5-star or a 1-star, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that bad ratings are bad necessarily, but I think the idea is you get some confirmation. Whereas a lot of other content that you put out there, I don't know that likes and follows and shares on social media are really a testimony to the quality of content, right? But in a podcast and in a book, when you start getting reviews and you start seeing people say 5 stars, and then they write 2 or 3 sentences about how it benefited them or the value that they got from it, right? I think that really creates some credibility for yourself, right? Confirmation for yourself, but then credibility that you can put out in the world as social proof that, hey, I kind of do know what I'm talking about. I am an expert in this area, and so I think it helps elevate that expertise that you're trying to, I don't want to say portray, right? The expertise that you believe, the value you bring to the world.
Mm. So going through your website, which is amazing, by the way, you have to definitely head over there. addvaluetolife.com. There's so many great resources there, and I get a little taste of your background and your history. It's pretty rich. You've traveled a lot. You've served your country. Thank you for doing that, by the way. I spoke to one active military service person, and they were saying something like 1% of the American population serves their country, in the Marine Corps and all that.
It's a little higher.
It's like a little higher. Yeah. She was saying it's really low though. Like it's not like crazy popular.
It's below 10, but I think it pushes 10% of our population 10%, at different times, right? Post Desert Storm, like the numbers were way up, but yeah, I think, it's still even 10%. It seems like a pretty small number of a total population in defense of a total population, right?
Yeah. So you've traveled the world with that. You've traveled the world in ministry, helping people. You've kind of built a platform for yourself just based on your life experiences. How do you leverage all of these different aspects of your past and what you've done today to help people? Because I think you have a lens that most people don't have. You've seen things, you've done things that most people haven't done. So that's like your superpower, I guess, in dealing with people today. How do you take all that goodness and all those learnings and bring it into your consulting today? Kind of walk me through that a little bit.
Well, it's interesting how some of those things have come about. I think obviously every business is a people business, and understanding people multiculturally gives me a little advantage. I don't know that it's a lot, but a little. But one of the things that I noticed, and you mentioned smiling, and smiling continued to come back. And one of the things that I always said was that a smile is universal language. No matter what country you're in, a smile is powerful. A hug is powerful. Joy is evident, right, on a person's face, on a person's countenance. You can see joy. And I think my focus in business coaching, my focus in serving people and helping people is helping them rediscover joy. And the fascinating thing is, in all the countries that I visited, the United States and Canada I would include together, right? They're pretty close cousins for certain when it comes to attitude in business. That's where the joy and the happiness is being lost. Not the countries that have these high levels of poverty, not the countries that have these terrible tragedies that have occurred there. But in the United States and Canada, where we have access to so much stuff and so much opportunity and so much that it's actually a distraction to happiness. And I think one of the things that I can really bring to help people is simplicity and allowing people to get back to what makes them joyful, what brings them happiness. And really helping them redefine success. And instead of allowing our culture to tell us that success is all about bigger, better, more, to really be able to step back and say, what does success look like for me? What does joy look like for me? What do I want my business to really be? And that's where the real power, I think the real superpower in that is allowing people to step away from the cultural ideas and choose their own. Choose your own, design your own life that you really want, and then let's build a business that supports that. Rather than getting stuck in this business and allowing the business and more and better and bigger and to take over and just run you into the ground, because that's what happens, and or overwhelm you with all of this, because that's what happens. You hire people and you got all these responsibilities, and pretty soon the business is going, and it's not what you started with. It's not the passion. It's not the purpose. It's not the smile. It's not the joy. The joy is the impact you can make and the difference you can make, and how you want to change the world, how you want to impact the world. And that can be bigger, better, and more, but it doesn't have to be. And so that's the choice that you get to make when you design something. And why not design what you really want? And then let's design a business that supports it and builds it and makes it happen.
It all built around the power of a smile. I love that. So like I'm a musician and I go into the studio, and I actually remember sitting in the studio with the producer recording a song, and the singer was in the booth, and they just finished their lines in the song, and the producer pushes the button, comes back and says, okay, that was good. Let's try that again, but smile when you sing. And I'm like, it's a song. In my head, I'm thinking, who's going to see this person smile? We're not videotaping. What are you talking about? And the producer said, when you smile, as you sing, as you speak, it changes, I guess, the timbre in your voice. There's a little change physically that happens. And it shows, and you can actually hear a smile in a song. And I'm like, what? So I try to keep that in mind in life, whether I'm on the phone with somebody, I'm podcasting, whatever. if you can incorporate that smile, and that's why I love what you're promoting and what you're living in front of us through the podcast and everything you're doing, is you're encouraging everyone to, no matter the situation, no matter how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur and wrestle with everything you have to do, you're doing it right now. The smile is the one thing that unifies all of us, and it people pick up on it, whether they can see you or they can't. They can feel the smile through the microphone, through the earphones, YouTube, whatever it is. They can connect with you just with that. It is so welcoming in our world to live with a smile, when I think there's so many things that divide us, really, and push us apart and put us into camps. A smile takes us out of those camps and brings us back into community again. So that's my thought. I don't know. Your turn.
I love that example from music and sound, that you can actually hear a smile. And one of the things that over the last couple of years, right, we were all masked up and everybody was saying you can't see their face, you can't see but the truth is you can see their smile. If they're really smiling behind that mask, you know it. You can tell. Yeah. You can see it in their eyes, you can see it in their cheeks, you can see it in their body. And so a smile is more powerful than just what your lips are doing. I guarantee it. And if you're paying attention and you really want to see people smiling, you'll see it. You'll see it in their eyes. You'll see it in their body. And you just know. And so, yeah, smile is a superpower. And I think it's one that's underrated. And it's one that we don't use very often. And it changes your countenance. It changes your body. It changes how you show up in the world. It changes how you sound in the world. And so I think a smile is a power you can use. And then the power in your mind that has the equal superpower is gratitude, right? And using gratitude intentionally to program your brain to focus on the things that you do have, to focus on the things that are positive in your life. Gratitude gives you the reasons to smile.
I love talking to a fellow podcaster. This is so much fun. Okay, tell me about the book, The Entrepreneurial Mindset Shift. Tell me a little bit. You have it with you there?
I do.
Authors always have the book within arm's reach. There you go. Of course you do. It's right there.
Because I'm reading it over and over to myself.
Right? The author is amazing for that book, by the way. You can probably see the smile in the book. That's probably. Tell me a little bit about the why behind the book and the audience you had in mind when you were writing.
Yeah, so the book's a little crazy. So last year I got to Christmas and celebrated Christmas with our family. And last year, Christmas and New Year's were both on the weekend, as they are again, I think, this year. And so there was a week in between, which typically nobody does a lot of work, right? And so my calendar had one 1-hour meeting scheduled. And I said, well, maybe it's time to write my book. And I committed to write 6,000 words a day for that week. So I wrote 6,000 words a day the week between Christmas and New Year's. And did a little more after that, but posted on Facebook. Like, I had no idea. Like, I'm just going to put a PDF on my website and it'll be good and whatever. And I posted on Facebook, hey, I wrote my first book between Christmas and New Year's. And one of my previous guests saw that post and said, hey, I know a publisher. Let me introduce you. And made a connection. January 5th, I met the publisher. I actually met 2 other publishers who, we can do edits and we can do this and we can do that in 6 months and 8 months. And, next year your book will be in print. And this other publisher that I met said, man, we could do it by your birthday. When's your birthday? I said, March 7th. And he said, oh, well, I think we can do that. Yeah. Well, we didn't have a forward yet. And so I approached somebody for my forward and actually ended up using the second person because it was a better fit, but was also a guest on my podcast. So now we're connecting the podcast back to the book. So one of my multi-millionaire real estate investors wrote the forward for the book, which was incredible. It was an incredible gift. And that in itself was a huge blessing. Like, I didn't even think of I'll have my wife write the forward, like, whatever, no big deal. And the publisher's like, no, you need a name. You need somebody that they can Google, right? And so if they Google that person, it adds credibility. And so, all right. So, but I've had these podcast guests. So I've had 100 podcast guests at that point and said, why not reach out to one or two of them. And so that was kind of, the podcast really served in helping with that. And it also served in helping with endorsements. And so, I have endorsements from John David Mann, who co-authored The Go-Giver. And he wrote an extra note when he wrote it back to me, and he says, Robert, I really like the book. And so these were people that didn't just write an endorsement because I asked them to write an endorsement. They're people that read the book and then wrote an endorsement saying, hey, I really like the book. This was really enjoyable. It's a little on the simple side. My intention was, when I started, was I want to teach my children the entrepreneurial things that they didn't teach in school. And that was kind of the premise that I started with. And that was the audience that I was kind of starting with. Good. And of course, it kind of shifted towards a combination between what I wanted to teach my kids and what I was working with my existing clients. And so that's kind of where the book kind of ended up, and why we titled it, The Entrepreneur, Mindset Shift, Growth Characteristics of Success. Also, those were searchable keywords. So that was a combination of how the title came about.
How does it feel to be a published author? Like, again, pre-podcast, post-podcast, like you're actively doing it. There was a point in time when you didn't have a book, and now you do. How does having a book open doors for you in the business community?
It's absolutely open doors to be on podcasts. I'm on 2 podcasts a week. I'm committed to doing 2 podcasts a week with other hosts. Yeah. And if you say, hey, I wrote a book, I'd love to talk about it on your podcast, that pretty much is all I need to say for the most part, right? Other than I can say I'm a podcaster, I can say a couple of these other things. But typically the book, being an author, podcasters want to talk to authors. And so it's a great door opener. Absolutely has created opportunities in addition to the podcast. And the 2 of them together are like a superpower. Like they really do elevate the game to opening doors for connections.
So we have new authors listening to our conversation. What would you say to them if they are launching a book? Should they maybe include podcast guesting or having a podcast or some form of that in support of their book? Would you encourage that?
Yes.
That was
absolutely
easy. That was simple. Yeah.
I mean, I think, there's the power of getting into somebody else's audience is like incredible. Like if you get the chance to sit in front of, like, if we thought about it in the old networking sense, right? When we were all in our same little city and had the chance to go speak at an event with 20 people, with 100 people, you jump at the chance, right? Oh, these people want you to tell them about your book. Come and speak, right? You'd be like, oh yeah, 100 people. You're gonna have 20. You're gonna have 5 people there. I'm all over it, right? But now on these podcasts, you get the chance to get in front of thousands, and so absolutely the best way to promote your book is to commit to getting on podcasts, and make the ebook cheap, make the ebook free, make the ebook, so. My wife and I, our ebook's like $3.95 for people to get, and it's a cheap and easy way to get started. And if they like the ebook, then hopefully, hey, maybe 1 out of 100 will call and ask for coaching.
Right?
It's a great opportunity. Yeah. It's a great little business card.
Yeah, the one thing I encourage, like I have a lot of new podcast guests that have never been on a podcast ever, and like a new author or something. And so all I say to them, and I'm not trying to brag about my podcast, I'm saying, do a Google search on the name of your book and your name before the podcast comes out. Just do a search and find out what page on Google you are. Page 1, page 5, page 8, and how many posts do you see about your book and your name. Just do that. And then after the podcast comes out, give it about a week, do the exact same search again and just see what pops up. And because you are now going to be on YouTube, on podcast apps around the world. People are going to be interacting with you. And it's a great free way for you to get out there and get your message in front of a community. And I love it because not only do you get a chance to see and hear the author, but you get to feel like you know them better. So when you go to a website or a store to buy a book, it's like, I know Robert. He's the smiling guy. Yeah, I know that guy. I'm going to buy his book, right? So it takes away that fear of, well, am I going to like Robert? Am I going to like what he says? oh, I know Robert because I listened to him for an hour. So I'm good. So that it just takes that whole feeling of awkwardness of I don't know this person, takes it all away and opens that door to purchase the book. So I would encourage everyone listening to go buy Robert's book because, again, you're going to get a free smile with every book. So that's a deal, you know. And Amazon has a little smile as the icon, so it's a perfect match.
Absolutely. And most everybody loves my chapter 2. So chapter 2 is titled "Own Your Take Responsibility for Your Life and Business." And the truth is nobody else is going to, right? My drill instructor would always say, your mother is not here to clean up after you. So you got to own and take care of it.
Yeah.
And somehow we get into life and business and we think it's somebody else's responsibility. It's somebody else's problem. And your life and your business is only your problem and only you can clean up after yourself. So take it, own it, and make it what you want it to be instead of waiting for the world to make it what it wants it to be.
Buy the book for chapter 2 alone. There you go. How's that? Right? The rest of the book is free, but buy chapter 2 and the rest of the book is included. So what's next? What's next for you? Give us the inside scoop. We're here with you to the end. We got to know what's coming up for you and what's down the road.
So I'm working on a parable book. So the basically story of an entrepreneur and his hiring a mentor or coming alongside a mentor and so, you know, the similar parable of teaching that entrepreneur and helping him get to the next level as a mentor. And so some experiences and some stories from my clients and some fictional pieces just to, you know, liven it up and make it a little more, I guess, where fiction and nonfiction meet. The parables seem to be pretty popular. And a friend of ours wrote one for direct sales that just is incredible. And so it was like, it drove me to say, all right, we're going to take these principles and then teach them in a nonfiction story type format. And so that's in the works. The podcast continues. I'm working on a compilation book for opportunity for entrepreneurs that are listening that want to get involved in a book and don't want to write a whole book and don't want to write 6,000 words a day. You only have to write 1,500 words to get to participate. And of course, there's some costs involved, but then you get copies of the book to sell and you get listed on Amazon as an author and you've got 30 other authors that are marketing the book as well. So it'll quickly outsell what a single author book can kind of do. So compilations are kind of fun. And so working on that as well. So
amazing. So if you're watching the video, you already know the website because it's right there above Robert's head. AddValueToLife.com. That's very well placed, by the way. You can see it clearly on screen. AddValueToLife.com is the website. The book, The Entrepreneur Mindset Shift, and the podcast, Add Value to Life. This gentleman has everything all figured out, and I have a lot to learn. So I'm going to be listening to your podcast and taking notes. So thank you for creating all of this content. Thank you for smiling. Seriously, this is amazing to have somebody come on and bring joy, not just to the podcast, but to his community and the world around you. Don't stop, please. We need more of this in our life. So I'm here from Canada applauding and saying, watch out for the moose and, enjoy the journey because you have not only lived a great journey so far, but there's so much more ahead for you guys. And I'm really excited to watch and be a spectator and a community member with you at the same time. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for the opportunity to have a conversation. And it's been fantastic to talk about swamp donkeys and getting chased on bicycles and and snow. We talked about snow.
So. That's right. Yes. So so this is my guest. Make sure you go check out all the stuff in the show notes because if you need a little bit more smiles in your life, you need a few more of those. This gentleman has a few that he wants to loan to you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here with us today again. Thank you for subscribing and following. And you're listening this far in the podcast, so you are my best friend. I'm sorry, but you are now my best friend. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. LivingTheNextChapter.com has a link on the website to our Facebook group. Are you on Facebook? Probably. You can go there and you can actually interact with our guests. You can talk to them. You can hear more about their journey, about their books. You can speak to them directly. You don't need me. You can come right over to LivingTheNextChapter.com, click on our Facebook link to our community. You can talk to other listeners of the podcast from around the world who are on Facebook. And, again, speak with our guests. Don't you want to speak to the guests you just heard from? Yeah, you can do that on Living the Next Chapter. Go over there. There's links to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. Thanks for listening.